everyone, and welcome to another tier list video. And today we're going to be talking about some character tropes that I had some thoughts on, as well as you all, because I asked over on Twitter what your favorite and least favorite character tropes were. And I'm going to try and give kind of an alternate take on a few of these. Some of them are full on, like this is the basis for your character tropes. Other of these tropes can just define a character in certain ways. I do want to remind everyone that using any trope in your story, if it feels appropriate and fits your vision, is okay if you handle it carefully and well. Just because something might be a trope does not mean it's bad. I guarantee you your favorite characters are your favorite characters because of certain incredibly well utilized tropes within them. Without any further ado though, you're gonna listen to this idiot's opinion on these tropes. First off, we have one that I think I'm gonna confidently put in S with no hesitation here, and this is going to be the duo characters. Two characters that are just tied to each other in nearly every single way. The spotlight of the narrative, the focus of the story does not leave their relationship, and pretty much most of, if not all of the hurdles they'll encounter throughout their journey are just meant to enhance or destruct the relationship that is the soul of what you're experiencing. Not only do I have a hard time thinking of stories where they would be better off if they didn't have this in them, but I can't even think of an example of it I do not at least in some ways really like. And I think that goes to speak on the fact that this trope inherently forces you as a writer to bring character to the forefront of your narrative, and at the end of the day, character is the heart of storytelling. Say what you will about Last of Us 2, the reason people had such an incredibly strong emotional reaction to it was how much people cared about that relationship between Ellie and Joel. Now these next three I put in a row for a very specific reason, because I think there are three very different tropes that people often lump into one. The first is going to be the reluctant hero. Very often this person can be an anti-hero as well, but not always. I think a good example would be Slowhand from Kings of the Wild. He doesn't want to go on the journey, but he's talked into it, so he throws himself into it, and at the end of the day, you get Kings of the Wild. If you haven't read that, do. It's great. Reluctant heroes can be anti-heroes, but this should be handled very differently in storytelling, in my opinion. Whereas anti-heroes you can really play with throughout the story with their levels of commitment to heroing, I find reluctant heroes to kind of be on one track. You have to eventually make them care, either by making them hate the villain, become invested in whatever's getting them involved in this situation. Maybe they're starting to fall in love with someone they're going to protect, something along those lines. Otherwise, if they're just reluctant the entire time, that's not going to be very interesting. It adds a stagnacism inherently to the character that you have to overcome. So this is kind of a self-killing trope where eventually a reluctant hero should become a willing hero. But there are some incredible examples out there of reluctant heroes who are reluctant to the very end. I just think for most hobby or junior writers, that might be a little bit too much of a task to take on at first, because you need so much nuance and so many other things developing around the character trait that makes them reluctant that it just becomes a whole other level of character writing I don't think most people are prepared for. Be a little bit quiet because Mako is on my lap for the first time ever while I've been working, so I'm trying to be a little bit more tempered than I normally am. But also a great way to utilize a reluctant hero isn't to make them reluctant because they're like jaded and badass and a veteran, but maybe they're a bit cowardly. Bilbo is a reluctant hero at first, and he comes across more heroic because he overcomes that reluctance. I am so blessed right now. I think Pips is going to join us in the cuddling. This is peak cat owner right now. But for reluctant hero, I'm gonna go B. Now, real anti-heroes. These are people who maybe their motivations are super messed up, but they're doing the right thing. Maybe they're doing the right thing in an over-the-top bloody way. Anti-heroes have been all the rage and still are all the rage in storytelling. I do think especially in a team dynamic where you have several protagonists, having one who's more of an anti-hero, who's willing to use some really sketchy civilian casualty tactics alongside people who aren't, can really add some interesting conflict to a team dynamic. The only issue is there's so many examples of characters in this field now that they're starting to feel a bit redundant even with some of the fresher takes on anti-heroes. I'm just not as excited as I used to be when I see anti-hero now, so I'm just gonna put it just above reluctant hero. And then we have the last one, which is one I'm including because of a conversation I had on Twitter that I think is interesting, and I want to really make the differentiation here between anti-hero and anti-villain. The anti-villain, I'm gonna use example of Jesse Pinkman. Now, the reason I put this example in there is because I was talking about on Twitter how I see so many many people call Jesse Pinkman an anti-hero. What has Jesse Pinkman ever done that is heroic? He's a very sympathetic villain. You see him being manipulated, gaslit, but he's still an adult who at the end of the day is choosing the things he's choosing to do, and even in his last appearance in the movie El Camino, he is putting himself in dangerous situations he knows could result in a loss of life without just going to the police, and he's acting selfishly. This is not someone who's a hero. They are a villain, but they are an incredibly sympathetic villain. And every example of this outside of Jesse I could think of, I realized, oh my god, I love. In fact, this might be my favorite villain trope the more I think about it. If you can make it so that at the end of the day, I know what this person's doing is monstrous and they're either behaving immaturely, selfishly, or stupidly, but I still feel horrible for them because of their own actions, that's an awesome villain. It means when they're taken down, I might even hate the hero for taking them down. It's just fantastic. And I'm gonna put it right up there with the duo at the center of the story. And then kind of rounding this all out, we're gonna bring in one of my least favorite villain tropes, the I'm a bad guy because society and or people as a whole were mean to me trope. I really hate that, especially because they're often treated as a surprise villain, which so rarely actually is pulled off. I can think of a couple iconic great examples, but honestly not too many from recent memory. I think this is also a trope that's just kind of dying off where, yeah, a lot of creatives are realizing having someone at the last minute be like, it was me the whole time because you all were mean to me a bit, and that sucked, so I've actually been just super convolutedly doing this ridiculous plan that at any given time for 1,000 different reasons could have gone totally wrong, because it's impossible at the end of the day to really have this planned out and executed well, especially if you're a starting writer. So for me, this is gonna go D tier. It's not something I hardly ever like. But jumping away from there though, we're going to go into one of my favorite hero tropes, and very often can be tied into someone who eventually becomes an anti-hero or a fallen hero, and that is going to be the revolutionary. I love when a protagonist starts out as a revolutionary, someone who wants to overthrow the government, change things up, unhappy with the system, because it often provides fantastic avenues for world building within just what they're taking issue with, and on top of that, it gives them so much motivation to possibly go too far. And they can become someone who wants to burn it all down, someone who doesn't care about the casualties, becomes too invested emotionally in their ideology, and then you get, oh my god, those trajectories that are so heartbreaking at the end of the day, where you're like, oh, gotta put him down, he's basically become a rabid dog, but you were on the right path, you were the chestnut. It's great. The only reason it's not going into S is I have a hard time thinking of too many examples. It's something I want more of, and if you're leaving me thirsty, I'm not satisfied. A tier, give me more. Maybe it should be S, I'm not sure. But if you want an example of what I'm talking about, Kelsier, come on. Now, here's a trope that gets far too much hate. The dumb character. Listen. I so often will ask someone if they like a book and they'll say no because the character's stupid. I'm sorry, are stupid people not allowed to exist? I actually really love well-written and justified stupid decisions for characters, because they're supposed to be human. And guess what? You've probably made a stupid decision today. You're watching my videos. They also can be incredibly emotionally gripping characters if their own incompetence continues down a tragic path. Or even worse, maybe they're exploited and forced down a tragic path. Flowers for Algernon, everybody. Basically, I'm gonna go ahead and put this in A because I think it's just overly hated on. Another example that comes to mind very often is I see people saying, oh, the main cast of characters of the Wheel of Time are just dumb kids. It's so annoying. Yes, they're dumb kids, and they're supposed to be annoying. I'm so tired of Fish Out of Water overused for comedic relief. I'm gonna go C. It can be funny still, but it's just not something I see utilized great often. Toxic friend. I love me a good toxic friend. Someone who, as the reader, maybe at first really likes them, maybe they're really charming in a bit of a sleazy way, and oh, they're getting their character to have a fun night out. Oh, this fun night, I was going a little too far. Maybe this friend's not so great. Very good. Needs to be used more often, quite frankly. Toxic friend, I really like toxic friends. Put more toxic friends in your writing who your character has to realize they need to distance themselves from. It's a great way to show growth in your own characters too. The horror element character. Now, this is one that I like so much because of the range it can bring to the table. You can have a standard fantasy series, something that's not that scary, and then just put in one type of monster, one character, one creature, that is absolutely terrifying. Think the Golem from Wheel of Time for continuing that example. I would even throw Kyle from Robin Hobb's works. You, Kyle. He's horrifyingly hateable. Or it can literally be just a monster like the Xenomorph example I have here. Even The Expanse has a phenomenal use of this. This is like a spice that works in small amounts to a full-on marinade. I'm gonna go A. The Bad Communicator. Now this is one that on average, I hate. We already know what I'm gonna say before I get into it. Character who just can't communicate and causes conflict that could be resolved in like 3 or 4 sentences. It sucks. Unless this character turns out to be intentionally miscommunicating. This kind of falls into the surprise villain, but it's got a bit more nuance to it. They don't have to be a full-on villain. They could just have different motivations or want to achieve a different outcome from your protagonist. Or maybe they've been blackmailed, had by the villain. It's still not my favorite, but because there's a few examples I can think of people who aren't necessarily bad, but just weren't aligned, weren't seeing things right with our singular perspective from the protagonist, I'll bring it above D, though this one often, it's super annoying when you see it, and it's not the type that I'm giving it the benefit of the doubt to be. The Mad Scientist, or, as I like to think of it, the witch. Seriously, there's so much overlap with how mad scientists and witches are treated in stories. The more I thought about it, the more I was just like, they're the same trope. One's just often men and the other is often women, though, you know, do whatever you want with that. Absolutely an S tier for me. Doc Brown's probably the most iconic example for me. He's probably one of my favorite characters from my childhood, but you have phenomenal examples of this ranging from the witches in Discworld to Moog from, once again, Kings of the Wild. Seriously, read Kings of the Wild. Whether it's science or magic, they're just gonna add a lot of flavor to your characterization. The Wise Old Mentor. Of course this is like top tier. Are you kidding me? The Wise Old Mentor is just goated. Everyone loves a wise old mentor. Moraine, Iroh, Dumbledore, Gandalf, Obi-Wan, who doesn't love these characters? And the bad version of them too, Sidious, can be totally awesome as well. Femme Fatale. I'm gonna be honest, I'm a big noir fan, and femme fatales, they get me. I'm a big fan of having someone who's very attractive and mysterious at the heart of a story. Maybe they're a victim, maybe they are the bad guy themselves. You're not really sure until you reach the end. Just how tainted by the darkness are they? Or could I marry him? Whether you make them men, women, gay, straight, I'm a bi guy. I just like someone who's dark and mysterious being kind of a temptation throughout the story. Let's be real, who doesn't f***ing love that? The Damsel in Distress. This is one where it really depends on how you're going to define it. If we're going with like the very textbook, your princess in the tower kind of stuff, this is obnoxious and it feels outdated, though even sometimes the counter to it where they try to like girl boss it can be condescending and not very good as well. But if we're taking it to a more broad look of just characters who need saving, I'm fine with that. I think it's absolutely okay to have a character at the heart of a story, whether it's a kid, woman, man, I don't care, but you need to really justify in the story why they're there and, you know, why they aren't able to get out of it in some way. Why is it particularly your protagonist that is needed? And maybe even more importantly than that, why is your antagonist going to such great extents to keep them prisoner when, you know, they could just off them or something else along those lines? So I think it can be good. It's often bad. It's had some tough times. I don't think it's ever something that's going to go away in storytelling. Hired muscle. Who doesn't love some good hired muscle for our main character to smack the shit out of? I would actually go as far as to say that this is like one of the most necessary beats within storytelling, especially if you're within any kind of action genre. They're kind of like the flour to making a cake, right? You're not gonna be able to do it without flour, but you're not gonna say like flour's your favorite ingredient. But yeah, I think they need to be there, so I'll give them A. The hyper-focused character, and what I mean by that is they have one real focus for their drive and development for the story in either like schooling, job. It's going to be the central catalyst for their trajectory as a character. Lit RPGs, from what I've been exposed to them, usually fall into this. So also does Guts. Guts from Berserk has one real drive after the events of Eclipse now, and it seems to be he's just hell-bent on going down this path of revenge. And that is, without a doubt, someone who's falling into just the focus category. This is his life's purpose. There's other things that are orbiting around that, but to say there's not one central drive for this character would just be wrong. The religious zealot trope, one I love. There is something so dangerous feeling about someone who's just frothing with this moral superiority and believing everything they do is in the word of God, but they're still entirely driven by their own human desires, just twisting their faith to fit those desires. And I still think this creepy f is Disney's best villain ever because of that. If you want sinister, there are few things in fiction or reality, in my opinion, than people who will pollute faith for their own selfish gains. I just love cult leaders. Cult leaders as villains. Oh, the redeemed hero. And I chose Kylo Ren for this because people often forget about instances of lackluster redeemed heroes and will point to the really, really great examples like Zuko, hi Tim. But if you remember the instances where it doesn't go as well, it can also just be insanely unsatisfying. It's like biting into a cookie someone forgot to put sugar in. There's such promise, and that final delivery is just so disappointing. If someone just flips sides and it's just because plot needs them to, it is so disappointing because it goes against what I said earlier in the video, and that is that character is everything. If a plot moment feels antithetical to established character, you can bet your ass your fans are gonna be mad. Pet Companion, S tier, don't need to say more. Chosen One, B tier. Kind of like the horror monster thing. It can be something that's only a little bit of your story, it can be something that's completely all over it, and it can succeed in all those ranges. It can just also fail very poorly in all those ranges, so I'll put it right in the middle. The fighter pushed too far. This is a trope that I haven't seen too many people talk about, but is in a lot of our stories. A fighter who basically has too much demanded of them physically. Someone who is forced to go beyond the physical limits that you can survive again and again, and maybe over years, maybe over just a few weeks, their body is just broken, and it's always such a tragic whole thing to go through. It's often the main protagonists who have a really long running series will start to show signs like these, like they're getting worn down, their body can't take it. But I also really enjoy it as an element to like a primary or even secondary companion as well. Let's say especially like a super powered main protagonist. Let's have the person who's trying to keep up with them start paying the price for doing that. All right, we're in the final stretch though now, so let's go ahead and rearrange these tropes and see if I like this final ordering. D tier, yeah, absolutely D tier. I'm gonna say I was probably a little bit too hard on fish out of water, but it's gonna be bottom. The communication one, yeah, there's a couple instances where it can be great, where it's like a really good element to like a long convoluted plot where there is actually a villain you know of who's maybe exploiting a character on the other side to cause miscommunications, but it's more often than not just people not communicating well for plot reasons. B, I like a lot of this. Anti-heroes are overused, but they can be really good, so put them near the top. I think Chosen One, top of B is fine. Reluctant Hero, yeah. Damsel in Distress probably deserves to be a little bit lower. Hyper Focus, I actually want to put higher. Let's bring that into A. Then we have the Redeemed Hero. I'll probably bring that up to like near the top of B because it is more often than not that I can think of done well. A tier, Revolutionary Top, I like that. Let's bring down dumb characters a little bit because I'm just saying if you do them brilliantly, they can be a phenomenal area of actually justifying miscommunication and stuff like that, where it doesn't just feel like a miscommunication trope, it's a character flaw. Broken down physically over time, love it. Hired Muscle, probably bring that a little lower. Toxic Friend, probably bring it even higher. I love a Toxic Friend. Femme Fatale, keep it there. Monster, gonna bring just above Broken Down. Hyper Focus, good there. And then the S tier, top, the duo. No, I'm actually gonna put the anti-villain at the top of S as well. And fight me, Jesse Pinkman does nothing heroic. He's not an anti-hero. Spoiler warning for Breaking Bad, even when he comes at Walter, it's not for altruistic reasons, it's for revenge. Because the best villains are what you're talking about there. The result of incredibly tragic circumstances and flawed thinking. Then the duo, then the Pet Companion. I'm gonna bring the Mad Scientist just above Pet Companion, and the Ols Wise Mentor as well. That's a solid S. I like this quite a bit. I will have the tier list linked down below if you would like to go ahead and fill out your own. Tweet it at me. I'll give my thoughts on your lists as well. Put some justification in them tweetums. And it feels good to be getting back to doing like a tier list kind of thing. We've been doing a lot of heavy videos, and these ones are just a little more light and fun and don't require quite as much from me mentally, so that's nice. But like and subscribe if you have not already. Hit the Patreon if you like support what I do here. I got books, I got merch, and have a good one, y'all. Peace!